Hello, my amazing children. This is Grandma Carla, and we are back with Treasures of the Snow by Patricia St. John. We are on chapter 14. Who made the Noah animals? The sun woke Danny at daybreak next morning, and he lay for a few minutes trying to remember what great event was going to happen that day. It soon came to him, and he sat up in bed and shouted for Annette. "Net," he shouted, "come quick. I'm coming to see you get a prize. Bring me my best black velvet suit and my embroidered braces and my galote. Quick!" Annette, in her bed at the top of the stairs, pretended not to hear until it had been repeated 4 times. Then she sat up. "Be quiet, Danny," she called back rather crossly. "I don't suppose I shall get a prize at all. And anyhow, it's much too early to dress. Father only just got up." Danny sighed and lay down again, but he was too excited to stop talking. He pulled Claus into bed with him and began whispering into one of his white ears. "I shall go in the cart, Claus," murmured Danny, "and I shall see all the things the children have made. But Annette's is the best, and I shall see her get a lovely prize, and I'll clap as loud as I can, and I shall wear my best suspenders. Oh, it will be fun." Claus yawned. So did Danny. After all, it was very early in the morning. When Annette came down later, she found them curled up into 2 balls, fast asleep in the sun. 1.5 hours later, they were off. Danny dressed in his Sunday black velvet and embroidered suspenders. His father pulled the cart, and Annette walked beside him, dull and sad and rather cross. What could be in making Annette dull and sad on such a morning? The sun was shining, the river was glistening, and Annette was going to win a prize. There was everything to make them happy, and anyhow, Danny never felt sad or cross, except when he had a pain in his leg. "Have you got a tummy ache, Annette?" asked Danny suddenly. "Of course I haven't, Danny," answered Annette peevishly. "Why should I have a tummy ache?" "I just thought you might," explained Danny. "Oh, Annette, look, there's a beautiful butterfly sitting on my shoe." But Annette did not even turn around to look at the blue butterfly. She walked on, staring at the ground. Whatever could be the matter with Annette? Already the schoolroom was filling with children when they arrived. The desk had been stacked on one side, and the children's work was laid out on long tables, and a pretty show it made. Mothers and fathers walked around admiringly, while the children jostled and nudged each other, pointing and chattering like magpies. There was the knitting table covered with brightly colored specimens of children's work. There was the embroidery table gay with embroidered aprons and belts. There was the lace-making table and the crochet table. On the other side was the boys' work with specimens of woodwork and carving carefully arranged. Pierre, the postman's son, was there, standing bright-eyed close to his own piece of work. A wooden inkstand with a bear standing over the inkwell. The snout was a little crooked, and the bear's sides were definitely fatter one side than the other. Still, it was a bear. There was no mistaking it. It was a good piece of work for a child Pierre's age. Pierre, who was a nice boy, blushed a little and looked the other way as his friends slapped him on the back and uttered noisy congratulations. Still, he was very pleased with that little bear himself, and he looked up and smiled proudly at his mother, who was coming toward him across the room. Lucien was there too, wandering around by himself as usual, for his mother was behindhand with the hay and had not come. He stared gloomily at the inkstand and compared that heavy stuck bear with his own sprightly horse. If only that accident had not happened, the children would have been standing around him instead of Pierre. He felt a great angry stab of jealousy for Pierre, who was clever and beautiful to look at, and good at games, and who now was going to win the prize that belonged to him, Lucian. He drifted away into a corner and stared gloomily at the crowd. Annette, surrounded by a chattering group of friends, was strangely silent. Some thought she would get the prize. Some backed up Jean. There was much guessing, much running to and fro, and much putting together of heads, some saying one thing and some saying another. Only Annette, usually so gay and talkative, said nothing. Danny, his hand clasped tightly in his father's, hopped around inspecting everything, and everyone made way for him and gave him a kind word as he passed. Then, having seen all there was to see, he took up his stand at the end of the long table close to Annette's jersey, so that he might be right on the spot when the prize winner was announced. Being a very small boy, there was nothing to be seen of him above the top of the table but his unruly sun-bleached hair and his round blue eyes, very wide and anxious. The door opened, and a sudden hush fell on the chattering crowd. The man from the town by the lake had arrived to judge the work. The children and parents stood quietly against the walls as the tall man walked slowly around, picking up and examining first one thing and then another. He praised a great many objects and spoke kindly of all. He had come prepared to see a good exhibition, he said, and he was not disappointed. He looked through the children's exercise books piled on a table in the far end of the room and talked about their work. A kind, patient man, but very slow. All the children wanted to know was who was going to get the prize. Well, he was going to make up his mind about the girls first. He walked over to Marcel's lace and examined it carefully. And then he went back to Annette's knitted jersey and stood turning it over in his hands. And the room was so silent that you could have heard a pin drop. Then suddenly the silence was broken. "My sister made that," said a clear, distinct boy's voice. The big man jumped and peered over the end of the table. He saw a small brown face lifted up to his, and just for a moment, he wondered why he suddenly found himself thinking of a young beech tree bursting into leaf in the sunshine. "Then your sister is a very clever girl," replied the big man gravely, after a few seconds' pause, and as he spoke, he noticed the crutches. "I think it's the very best of all, don't you?" went on Danny earnestly, quite unconscious that everyone in the room was listening to him, unconscious of anything but his great longing for Annette to win. As a matter of fact, the big man had not quite made up his mind when Danny first spoke, but now he suddenly felt quite certain. He did not realize that Danny had really decided it for him. "Yes, I do. I think it's the very best," answered the big man, and Danny, without an instant's hesitation, turned around on his crutches and faced his sister, who was blushing deeply at his bad behavior. "You've got the prize, Nett," called Danny, and everyone burst out laughing and started clapping. And so in this highly irregular and unexpected fashion, the prize winner for the girls was announced. Pierre won the boys' prize. It was announced properly after a suitable speech to which none of the children listened. Then there was tea, rolls, and gingerbread, and macaroons, and then Pierre went home with a crowd of admiring friends. They all played leapfrog in the square, and all bought chocolate sticks for Pierre by way of congratulations. Then he went home and ate the fruit tart his mother had cooked him for his supper, and was sick in the night. Lucian went down to the village alone to fetch the loaf, and when he came back past the school, the playground was deserted, and the children had all gone home. He climbed the hill slowly, but it was not the weight of the bread basket on his back that bowed his shoulders and made him walk with his eyes on the ground. Lucian was very unhappy. Why was it that one day it seemed easy to be brave and cheerful, and the next day it seemed impossible to be anything but angry and jealous? Yesterday, on the way home from the old man, he had thought that he would not mind seeing Pierre get the prize. But today, he hated Pierre. The old man had talked about striving to become what God meant you to be. But somehow, however hard you tried, it seemed impossible to change yourself for long. Yet the old man had become different, and Lucian found himself wondering how. The old man had talked about God. Perhaps God could make nasty people nice if they asked him. Lucian felt he didn't know very much about God, and anyhow, God was probably very angry at him for being so wicked. But could God really love him much? And surely God wouldn't forgive a sin like that in a hurry. And even if God did, no one else would. His unhappiness came surging back over him, and he gave a great sniff and kicked angrily at the stones on the path. He was passing the corner where the path divided not far from Annette's house, and as he branched off towards his own home, his ear was caught by the sound of a little child singing, and he turned to look. Danny and Klaus were sitting on a hollowed-out pile of new hay, like two birds in a nest, and Danny's bright head was bent low over something. As he crooned joyfully away to himself, his crutches lay on the ground. Urged on by his loneliness, Lucian drew a step nearer and stood watching. And suddenly his cheeks flushed with pleasure, and he drew a sharp little breath. For Danny had dug out a sort of cave in the wall of his hay nest, and inside it were grouped all of the little wooden animals that he had carved with such care. So he did give them to him, thought Lucian. So she did give them to him, thought Lucian to himself with a little thrill of happiness. And he does like them. And aloud he added, "What are you playing at, Danny?" Danny jumped and looked up and saw the boy who had tried to kill his kitten. His first idea was to seize Claus around the middle tightly and say, "Go away, you horrid boy." But as he said it, even he, although he was only 5 years old, could not help noticing that Lucian looked very unhappy, and unhappiness was a thing that his friendly little heart could not bear. So still holding the struggling and indignant Claus very tightly, he added cautiously after a moment's pause, "I'm playing with my fairy Noah animals, but Net said I mustn't talk to you." "But I wouldn't hurt you," answered Lucian very gently, "and I am very sorry about your leg. That's why I made those animals for you." "You didn't make them," answered Danny cheerfully. "I found them behind the woodpile. The fairies put them there." Lucian was just about to answer when Annette's voice came sharp and shrill from the front door of the chalet. "Danny," she shouted, "come at once. Dinner's ready." Lucian turned away. So she didn't tell him, he thought rather bitterly. Still, it was nice to know that Danny loved them and played with them. One day, he might get a chance to explain, and then perhaps he and Danny would be friends. He climbed the path between the hayfields, slightly comforted. Danny hopped into the kitchen, climbed into his seat, and hugged his empty tummy joyfully while his nose twitched like a rabbit's at the smell of grandmother's potato soup. "Net," began Danny, "Lucian said that he made my fairy Noah animals, but he didn't, did he? The fairies put them behind the woodpile, didn't they? He wasn't speaking truth, was he?" "I've told you not to talk to Lucian, Danny," said Annette rather crossly. "He'll only hurt you again. He's a horrid boy." "Yes," answered Danny, "and I only talked to him a teeny-weeny bit. But he didn't, did he, Net? Tell me." Annette hesitated. She was a truthful child, and she didn't want to tell a lie. But if Danny knew, he would be so grateful that he would forgive Lucian at once and go and thank him, and then there would be no telling where it would all end. They would be fast friends in a few minutes. It was hard enough as it was to make Danny be unfriendly with anyone. But if he knew about the animals, it would be quite impossible. You know you found them in the woodpile, she replied, looking away. So how could he have made them? Don't be silly, Danny. Well, he said he did, answered Danny, but I knew he didn't. It must have been the fairies, mustn't it, Net? Oh, I don't know, Danny, replied poor Net wearily. How you do chatter. Take your soup quickly. It will be cold. Danny obediently buried his nose in his soup. But grandmother, whose dim old eyes saw more than most people's, looked very hard at Annette. She too had heard and wondered at the story of the animals in the woodpile. And Annette, knowing that grandmother was looking hard at her, went very red, and going over to the stove, pretended to help herself to some more soup. But she only took a little, for somehow she wasn't a bit hungry. The day she had looked forward to for so long was all spoiled. She had the prize she wanted so badly, but it hadn't made her a bit happy. In fact, she was perfectly miserable. She washed up the supper dishes in silence, tucked up and kissed a warm, sleepy Danny, and slipped out alone into the summer night. She usually loved being alone on summer evenings, just alone with the still blue mountains, alone to look at what she wanted and to think and play what she liked and to go where she pleased. But tonight it was different. The rushing of the stream and the chirping of the crickets, even the lazy goat bells, seemed strange, unfriendly sounds, and the shadowed fields seemed lonely and frightening. She didn't want to think because she could think of nothing but that little smashed horse lying trampled on the ground and of the light that had died in Danny's face when she had spoken so crossly to him. Perhaps I shall never like being alone again, thought poor Annette, and she turned back toward home. I wish I could tell someone. It wouldn't be so bad then. I wish Mummy was still alive. Oh, I wish I hadn't done it. And that is the end of chapter 14. And this is Grandma Carla, and I love you.